Well, I've eased this off a little bit more. I just pulled it back and I think we're at 25-inch draw now, so we're getting pretty close. That's at £40. Ooh, yeah, good 24-inch draw. Now, you can see this was looking sort of arc of a circle, whereas this has still got the reflex. And someone was asking about, well, how do you judge the balance of it? How do you, what do you decide looks right? I can't give a specific answer. I don't really know, but generally things, if they look right, they are right. This looks quite nice with that limb curved like that, and this with this little bit of reflex. But I think maybe part of it, only maybe, is sort of the area enclosed by the string and the limb. Perhaps that's got something to do with it. And there's the business of how the bow rocks on the tiller. If you assume say the arrow passes here, the weight will be about there on the heel of your hand. So the bow will tend to sit a bit like this. Then as you pull it, this limb should be stiffer and it should rock round. Now, some people don't like that. Some people want you to clamp the bow. Fine, if you clamp the bow, you'll see the limbs moving independently. But that's not how a bow works. It's a continuous piece of wood supported firmly but not gripped solid by your hand. And if you look at something like the Yumi bow, in fact I did a video on it showing that it didn't matter where you supported the bow, you've still got the same curve of limb. It's one big limb really, it's not two separate limbs. And if you do treat it as two separate limbs but allowed to pivot, you'll get some compensation in that as one limb extends more, it gets harder and harder to pull, like an ordinary elastic band or coil spring. Force is proportional to extension. So if this limb's bending too much, then the more and more it bends, the harder it gets to bend. So some of the force will go over to this limb, which is, a bit stiffer, but this will take up some of the slack. So it tends to balance itself out anyway. So there's words like stress and strain which have subtle differences, and I don't want to get into all that because I'd get bloody confused anyway. But the strain gets shared between the two limbs, so there isn't really a problem. But the stress depends on the actual limb, and if one limb's got more stress than the other, that's the one that will break. So it's all a bit weird. You pays your money, you takes your choice. Just make it look pretty. But anyway, if we look at this, can that right limb uncoil a bit more? It's obviously bending, so this is straightening out. Perhaps it can straighten out a little bit more. This ugly deflex here, right at the tip, I can cheat with that. If I put a little glued on tip to act as like a tip overlay, I can just relieve it a bit underneath, and that will just make it look a little bit prettier. Won't make a lot of odds. Are we talking cosmetics or aesthetics? What's the difference? Anyway, make your own decisions. Do you think that looks pretty? Do you think it looks wrong? Is the left limb too stiff? It's not actually fully braced yet, so it's a working bow. I think that would string and shoot, but I'll tinker some more. And again, if you make it too perfect, has it ceased to become a character bow? Send your answers on a postcard. Here's the bow on the bench, and this is what I mean by this sort of ugly deflex tip. Now, if I sort of glue on a piece that comes like this, that would look a lot nicer. So if I sort of splice that in, you can see this is at a funny sloping angle anyway, so if I flatten off that, flatten off this face, glue a nice wedge on, trim away underneath, hopefully it will just look a bit prettier and won't do any harm. There, that's flattened the tip on the belt sander. Now I can cut a chunk out of this hornbeam and hopefully it will just make it look a bit less ugly. Now that's how the block of hornbeam will glue on. And you can see it just makes this line of the back a little nicer. I'm using it's a chainsaw file with the end ground at an angle just to sort of chisel off this bark, because there's some sort of grooves there, so I can just do it gently and blend it all in nicely. I'm using it's a chainsaw file with the end ground at an angle just to sort of chisel off this bark, because there's some sort of grooves there, so I can just do it gently and blend it all in nicely. Right, there's a quick look at it blended in. I mean, it's not perfect because the growth rings weren't lined up the same as they are on the parent wood, but it's only a stick bow anyhow. But it just gives you an idea, talking about, you know, cosmetics and aesthetics, just a little trick like that makes all the difference. We'll have to see what it looks like on the tiller, of course, but that'll do for now.